Hello and welcome to Babble. I'm Rob Simcox, and today I'm going to be chatting with James Kennedy. James is a man you can't really pin down to having one profession. Singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, record producer, record label owner, public speaker, and now published author. His music as part of a band and solo artist truly shows his talent through the diversity of genres and the fact that all of the production, including most of the instruments, was done by himself, start to finish. His part memoir, part expose, Noise Damage, My Life as a Rock and Roll Underdog, lays bare the struggles of navigating the music industry and his own, making it incredibly relatable for those in and out of the musical world. Contrasting these themes, along with some genuinely laugh out loud moments, make it a fantastic read. Welcome, James. How are we doing?
Thanks for having us.
Great. Where are we chatting to you today?
I'm in my humble abode in South Wales, town non-disclosed.
Fair enough. How has this lockdown situation been affecting you at the moment?
I hate to say it, man, because I know a lot of people are really struggling, especially in my profession. But it's been okay for me. I mean, I'm naturally quite a solitary kind of reclusive kind of person anyway. So for me, not a lot's changed. You know, I mean, I haven't been able to perform live, which sucks, and the music industry's taken a hammering. But personal level, yeah, it's been all right. I can't complain. I live in a nice house in the country. If I complained and said I was having it tough, I think I'd be insulting everybody who's got real problems. You know.
Yeah, I know you're feeling about that. I quite like my own space as well. So yeah, sometimes it can be quite nice to have this sort of time to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done quite a lot. I mean, obviously, the book came out during all this. I had an album come out, and my life has changed basically. You know, it's gone from just being a musician to now being an author as well, and I've got a literary agent now. We're talking about a second book, and my music publishing company is just in the process of changing, partnering with a global major company and stuff. So I think I've been taking advantage of the extra time, I guess, to really sort of hammer down and make some sort of some big changes.
Amazing. That sounds quite exciting. Sure. Yeah. My first question would be then, how did the book end up coming about? What made you want to say now's the time to write this book?
I think it was just because I was in a band called KYSHERA, and we were together for 10 years. And our last tour was in 2015 around Europe, and we were going really, really hard for about the last 5 years. We did 3 albums in 5 years. I did 3 solo albums in that time as well. We toured Europe, we've been to Canada and back, and headlined around the UK several times. We were going at it pretty hard. And I'd reached meltdown point after our last tour, and took some time away from the band. And things kind of went sour, as they do in bands. They're like relationships, and it kind of fizzled out. But it was technically still together. So I was still sort of holding on hope that we'd get back together and stuff. So I didn't really do anything as a solo artist or as a separate entity, for that time. And then when the boys both officially left the band in December 2018, that was okay, well, that's that over, the thing that I devoted my life to for the past 10 years, the thing that I've done nothing else except that for 10 years was now gone. It was taken away from me. So I think I started writing the book literally about 2 weeks after. And I think it was more just for personal reasons, really, just trying to make sense of, I'm in a certain place in my life now, a certain age, and the thing that I thought I was going to be doing forever is now not happening. So what does any of it mean? Does what I've done previously with the band, is there any value in that? And what's next? And I think I was just trying to make sense of it all. I mean, there was a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of resentment and nostalgia and all that sort of stuff. And I think I just started writing the book for my own cathartic reasons, really, and that kind of reflecting upon lessons I've learned, and anecdotes and tales, and good times, bad times. And I think once I got about halfway through, I started to feel like okay, this actually feels like a book, and I think that there could be some stuff in here that would be useful for other musicians or just just people in general,
Yeah.
and like literally within a month, I wrote it in 2 months. I wrote the whole thing in 2 months, start to finish, and within a month, I had a publishing deal. So, I mean, if I'd known that it was going to be on the bookshelves of my local Waterstones, I don't think I would have written the same book. I wouldn't have been
Yeah.
as honest. I wouldn't have been as brutal. I wouldn't have been as. I wouldn't have named people by their real names. And so that's probably a good thing that I didn't write it with any intention of it being a book. Otherwise, it would have been probably watered down.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Uh, Actually, speaking about, if you don't mind talking about it, your own struggles, because there is a lot of mental health sort of issues that are obvious in the music industry, and I've seen a lot of people trying to change that recently. But do you find that it's just an inherent issue within the industry that's quite unavoidable, or are there ways that you could possibly protect yourself for going into it or just going through it?
I do think it's quite endemic in the music industry. I mean, even people like Ed Sheeran talk
Mm.
quite openly about it and stuff. And there's people then at the bottom of the pile like myself that deal with it for very different reasons. And I sort of explore those different reasons in the book. I mean, a lot of bands talk about the pressures of fame and success and money and excess and all that sort of stuff. And that's one set of problems. And then there's bands who are on the other side of the spectrum, like us, who are struggling with too much pressure and failure and people screwing you over and disappointment and letting you down and sacrifice and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like I don't know if there's a sweet spot whereby it's all fairies and unicorns. I'm not sure. I mean, it might be something to do with the nature of being a creative person in an industry which is very uncertain, very cutthroat, and has very few winners, really. And even the winners then realize that there isn't much gold at the end of that rainbow either. So I think it is quite endemic in the music industry. But I don't think that it has to be that way. I think if you go into it purely just to enjoy it with your friends and make some music, and whatever happens, happens. And if it doesn't, no problem. I think that's probably the best way to go into it. But for me, I pressured myself way too much. I had big ambitions artistically in terms of my career. And that just kind of ruined all the fun, not just for me, but for the people that were in the band with me as well. It was very serious. And it eventually just burned me out. So I feel like if I was going to start again, and if I could give anybody any advice, I would say do it for the right reasons. Do it because you love the music and you want to make good music and you want to have fun. And don't think of anything outside of that. The second you start taking it too seriously and you start getting emotionally invested,
Mm.
that's where the clouds are coming.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, no, I've been there myself with my own sort of when I've done my own sort of music sort of stuff. There's a lot of pressure you put on yourself, being because you're your own worst enemy a lot of the time, aren't you? You end up being you write something, you produce it, and you're like, yeah, that sounds all right. Don't know what anyone else is going to think about it though.
Yeah,
And then you just have that just sort of endless cycle. Whereas if you listen to someone else's song and they guarantee were thinking the same thing when they wrote that song, but when you listen to it, you're like, oh, it's great.
totally. Yeah. Well, one of my idols is Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. And, there's like, what is it, like one in every three households in the UK has got like, Dark Side of the Moon or something like that in their collection. And, absolute rock legend, icon, sold gazillions of records, right? And one of my favorite albums is The Wall. And the classic track of that album is Comfortably Numb. An absolute genius track. Everyone loves it. It's just an absolute masterpiece, timeless masterpiece. And he hates it because the kick drum pattern wasn't the one that he wanted. So it's like we would have no idea because we're just saying we're taking it at face value. But the person behind it was aware of the technical process and recording it, the idea that didn't work out and stuff. So I think there's a lot of mythology in the music world, where we imagine that these guys are living the dream. And that kind of imagery is peddled really by the industry. It's not really the truth of what goes on in anybody's life, at the top of the game or at the bottom.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm gonna go on to the next question there, which would be, yeah, obviously you guys you and the band initially started, you joined during the industry crash. During that time, what what were the key things? I mean, this is in the book in part, but what were the key things you had to do initially to sort of balance that in between section and push yourself as far as you could during that time?
Well, we didn't really know that we were in the in-between section.
Yeah, of course.
The thing about it, like, it took me a long time to kind of get the memo that things were changing, because I'd had a lot of interest in the album that I did, and again, just very similar to the book, I wrote the first album without any plan or agenda. I just did it for my own artistic reasons, just for fun.
Yeah.
And I had a full album produced. I played everything. I did it all myself. And I just to get it away from it, to get a bit of distance and closure from it, so that I could stop messing with it, I sent it out to some magazines. And I was getting double-page spreads all of a sudden. Then I was getting like Sony Records on the phone, EMI on the phone. I was going back and forth to London for meetings, and it was, I hadn't really prepared for that, and I didn't have any understanding of how the business worked. I didn't know really, what was on the horizon or anything like that. I was going into it very, as a starry-eyed kind of village kid, and it was literally like 2 years, before the industry really tanked, and I didn't see it coming, because I hadn't seen the build-up, So all I knew was there was all this interest, and we've got to get to London, we've got to play some shows, we've got to let these guys see us play live. And by that point, it was too late, because within 2 years, all those guys were out of a job. All the smaller labels had closed, the live venues were closing, and nobody knew what was going on for 5 years. But I still thought that the industry was the way that it always was,
Yeah.
pressing up demo CDs and MySpace and sending things out. And it took me a good few years to realize that, hang on, something's changed here, And I think when I realized in about 2008, 2009, that this is a waste of time, and it's like it's costing me a lot, not necessarily just financially, but emotionally, and relationships, and my health and everything, just pushing against this wall. But it's just, there's nothing behind it anymore, And that's when I set up my own independent label. And the second kind of incarnation of the band was in 2010, when we actually released our first commercially available album on my label, Conic Records. And that 5 years then was like the most successful of the band, because we did, like I said, album tour. I kind of figured out the rules of the game by that point. But I'd already done 5 years of slog by that point. So, the second 5 years slog was much more productive, but it was still an additional slog to the one I'd already done. So I think a lot of the guys coming into the band had a lot more energy and morale than I did, but I was already quite kind of weathered down by that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hear that quite a bit. The music industry just does that. It's just, the way it's structured these days, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Tough. It's tough, but I mean, it's a beautiful thing as well. I mean, there's something about music that just it just keeps you putting up with that crap. You know what I mean? It's like, even now, I'm very aware of it now, and I've written a book and all that sort of stuff, and I've got the reflection of it. But I'm still planning a tour, for when the pandemic is finished. So I've got a new album just come out. So there's something about it that just keeps you coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heard,
Yeah, it's something about people being so authentic, or when they are authentic within their sound and their music, that it's just going to make you keep coming back for more, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a drug.
You put a lot of politics into your music, especially. Is that how important is that to you to get that into your own stuff?
I always just write about what I'm interested in. I mean, I'm very interested in politics and philosophy and science and, all sorts of things. But the first two KYSHERA albums were exclusively political. I hadn't really lived enough life by that point to have any personal problems to write about. So I wanted to use whatever platform I had as a songwriter and as a band to sort of talk about causes and explore those issues. And I've always been interested in bands that do that, like Rage Against the Machine and the Manics and a lot of hip hop music and stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to do that with my own lyrics. I didn't really want to talk about, my girlfriend or my mum or whatever. I wasn't really from that kind of background. So yeah, but then I think as the struggle of being in a band and life and broken relationships and being poor and all that sort of stuff, as I sort of got a bit more worldly and a bit more mature, I started to explore then, personal things. Like on my previous solo album, Home, that was all about, mental health and depression and coming out the other side of it and getting a clearer perspective on what really matters in life, making sense of all that stuff. But now on this new album, I'm back to the politics again. So I very much kind of just go wherever I'm inspired. I couldn't write a political album just for the sake of it. I'd have to actually have some stuff that I had to say, and if I didn't, I would say something else.
Yeah, well, that could sort of lead on to my next. What is your? I assume the creative process for you is somewhat of, from what you just said, whatever's on your mind at the moment. But how do you end up going from start to finish with either a song or an album in that way?
My methodology is very well defined now. It wasn't always that way. I've sort of, I'm self-taught in everything I've done. So I've kind of learned the hard way how to do a lot of this stuff in production, songwriting, guitar playing, singing, running a label, all that stuff. I've learned it as I've gone along. But now after doing like 7 albums, I've got a very well-defined creative process. And I talk about it in the book. Basically what it is I catalog moments. So I've always got my phone with me and I've got my voice notes on there. And every time I'm driving or, whatever, and a melody comes or a lyric or a beat or whatever it is, I immediately put it in the voice notes or I write it down and then I move on. And I feel like the best ideas are the ones that just come to you out of the ether. I think when you're trying to do something, you're trying to make it sound like something or whatever, that's when nothing's good's coming. That's when you're hitting the wall and the writer's block. So for me, I let the ideas come to me. I listen to a lot of different music and I read a lot of different books and I kind of feed my inspiration. And then when those good ideas come, I catalog them all. And then when I've got a good amount of stuff, the little seeds of good bits and bobs that I can work with, then I kind of I go back over it all and I sort of start to fill in the gaps. So I'll listen to an idea and I'll be like, wow, that's a really good chorus. I forgot that I even put that down. When did I record that? And then you kind of get inspired then by your own idea because something that you recorded in the car and then forgot about, when you listen back to it 3 weeks later, it's like, man, that's a good riff. Then you start vibing off it, you start coming up with something else. And then that's how it all starts. So I just collect those kind of moments that come to you. They're normally the best. And then I just wait for them to come. And all of the last albums I've done, the last 3 albums I've done have all been completely written and recorded and mastered, everything in 3 months. So that's the last 3 albums. So that's using that process. So I just catalog all these ideas and then I have a day where I go through them and I think, there's a lot of good stuff here. Let's fill those blanks and make an album. And it's pretty easy by that point because you're starting with a pile of good stuff, and it's pretty exciting. And you're not really struggling for ideas because you're listening to good ideas that excite you. So and I feel like I could be really intense about something then because I play all the instruments, so I do all the production myself. I feel like I can really intensely throw myself into something then for about 3 months on the writing and the recording. Any longer than that, and I start to get bored of it, and I start to pick holes in it, and I start to polish it, and then it turns into something else. So I feel like that's working for me, doing it that way. So I'll probably keep doing it that way, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm well aware of the taking too long on it. You need to give yourself deadlines for these things, otherwise you just sit there, keep thinking it over, then you end up overdoing it.
Oh, yeah. I've been there, done that, man. Yeah, totally.
This is particularly inspiring and impressive to me because I've also suffered with sort of certain hearing issues for myself. Inspiring and impressive that you powered through. What was it? I've read it was a 40% hearing loss.
Yeah.
And the mix and the production of your records are absolutely fantastic.
Oh, right,
I
right.
find that very inspiring.
Thanks,
Cheers
man.
for that. Sorry, I had to get that one in there for myself.
I was going to say, yeah, like, if you got hearing struggles as well, then So, what is your what is your hearing situation, and what is you are hearing
Uh,
loss?
well, I've just slightly done. I had grommets put in when I was a lot younger, and I'm just slightly less on the right hand side, which
Right.
makes panning a little more difficult. But
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but it's a sort of
I'm more down on my left side, so on my studio amplifier, I've got the left side up a little bit louder, so that I get the proper stereo imaging.
nice. Yeah, that's a good shout. Don't know why I
Bit of
haven't thought of doing that before.
louder on. It's not louder on the actual mix, but it's just louder on my playback, so it doesn't affect the mix too much.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I'm gonna try that out in future. uh, so yeah, in you find a lot in films, books, media in general that there's a lot of the notion of the sex, drugs, rock and roll vibes,
Yeah.
and anyone even outside the industry probably understands that sort of thing. When you got into the industry, did you end up being almost sort of blindsided by the fact that these ideas can actually end up having quite a big effect, or did you find that they had an effect on you, this or is it not as bad as it seems?
Yeah, so you mean like the rock and roll cliche, like the
Yeah,
lifestyle, that sort of thing.
yeah.
I, I was never really interested in that. Really, I'm very un-rock and roll. I was always just into like the music and the message, and wanting to be the next Frank Zappa and stuff like that. And I was never really into bands that were very rock and roll either. Like my hero, like Frank Zappa, didn't take drugs, didn't drink. He was just a composer, and I always kind of like the outcast guys. I guess I'm like a contrarian by nature, because if everybody in my sort of social group was into Kiss and Motley Crue and all that stuff, I would always be the guy to be like, well, I don't like it then. If everybody else likes it, I want to do the opposite. So I was never that impressed by the rock and roll cliche, and I feel like that is something that's quite old fashioned now as well. Like it was still very much a thing when I came on the scene, but now it's totally changed. Like that, it's kind of a little bit ridiculous now, isn't it? The whole trashing hotel rooms and
Yeah, it
abuse.
may have had its day, sort of
I
thing.
think it is a cliche now, and yeah, good riddance, man, because it was a bit ridiculous anyway. So it didn't really affect my life too much, because yeah, I thought it was all a bit silly anyway. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was more like what kind of eroded me more was my own drive and the pressure I put on myself and my own kind of unattainable expectations. That was the thing that chipped away. I was very much measured by my own standards. I wasn't bothered about the
Mhm.
expectations or the culture of the industry I was going into. I was very much I had my own lane planned. And when it didn't work out, I only had myself to beat up. And I think that was the beginning of my kind of mental health situation. But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, rock and roll thing. I mean, I don't drink alcohol. I'm drinking a decaf coffee right now. I'm the most un-rock and roll rock musician you ever meet.
Well, to be fair, I think that's becoming quite popular these days. Becoming much cleaner and much just looking after yourself is actually
Yeah,
becoming a much bigger part of. I mean, even in the music industry itself.
totally, totally, yeah. And yeah, it's kind of funny, like Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue and all that. So it's kind of funny, but I don't know how much truth there was in it anyway, really. I mean, Alice Cooper said there's only about like 30% of that stuff is true. I think at the end of the day, the mythology of rock and roll is a product in its own right. You know,
Yeah.
it's what sells bands. It's what sells magazines. It's what sells biographies about bands. The reality, as I've seen it, and as I've seen it in other people, is that touring is actually quite boring. I mean, apart from being on stage and having a crack with your friends and stuff like that, it's
Mm.
very regimented. It was for us, and I've been sort of like backstage, with like Iron Maiden gigs and stuff like that, and I've seen how mechanized the whole thing is. Um, And it's an industry, and the artist is the product. When you're touring at our level, and you're doing your own driving, your own merch, you've got to be regimented. You can't be off your face partying somewhere because you've got another gig that's 10 hours away tomorrow, and you've got to get there. So there was no partying for us on tour. Very rare, because you do the gig, you do the merch, you got to pack them, and then you've got to start driving to the next gig, sleep somewhere, and do it all again tomorrow. So and I think it's the same, for the stadium selling bands. They're on the tour bus and they're back on the road before the audience have even left the building. So I don't know where these parties take place, but apparently they do.
Yeah, yeah. I guess you just hear about the 1% of the big ones rather than the rest of it, don't you?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
That could sort of lead on to my next question. What advice would you give anyone heading into, especially the rock side of the music industry these days? If you were even to like join the industry now, or just give advice to someone,
I would say now is a better time than ever before. Because back in the good old days, as they say, if you couldn't get a record deal, it was over. You couldn't make a record for yourself. It was too expensive. It just wasn't possible. And so what if you did? It was physical distribution back in those days. It was all basically a monopoly that the major labels had on the whole business. But that's gone now, and good riddance to it. So, now is the golden era, really. If you can't get a deal, this doesn't matter. You can make a record in your house. Like I made my last 2 albums upstairs. It didn't cost me a penny. I did it all myself. And that's amazing. So the advice I would give people is don't go chasing a label or a deal or management or anything like that. Just do as much as you can for yourself. All the tools are freely available. You can distribute it to Spotify. You can use social media to promote yourself. All these tools are free and available. Do as much as you can for yourself, and keep it, the purest intention as you can. Do it for the music, do it for the crack with your friends, and promote it and take advantage of all these great tools, and do it for the right reasons. And it'll all probably work out just great, man. Make good music, put it out there, and do it for yourself. And I think honestly you'll achieve far more success that way. But if you don't, it doesn't matter, because you're still making music and you're still able to have a creative output, which you didn't even have that option before. So do as much as you can for yourself for as long as you can, and the industry will come chasing you down like a dog. Don't worry about it. They'll come sniffing as soon as you get something good happening for yourself.
Yeah, that's how a lot of people do it these days, and they do it for yourself, and then suddenly, pow, someone wants to pump a load of money into it, and that's how you get there.
Totally.
Amazing.
I really believe that, man. And a lot of people complain about streaming and all this stuff, but it was no better back in the day, really. It's just a different set of problems, but I think you've got a lot more opportunity and a lot more freedom and a lot more power and control now, and take advantage of it. The big problem now really is, how do you make a living doing that? Yeah. It's not all bells and it's not all theories and unicorns. There are downsides to the new model. The new model, one of the downsides is, how do you get heard above the noise of everyone else in the world doing it? That's one of the problems. And the second problem is, how do you make any money? But you just got to figure that out. A creative person can figure that out.
Fair. Good advice to anyone out there. Last question would be, what is next for James Kennedy?
Well, immediately I'm being nagged to pitch a second book, which is it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, Noise Damage has only been out 4 months or something, and that's got my entire life up until now in it. So I don't know what else I've got to say, really. But so that's a second book will be the immediate priority for the next few months. Mm-hmm. And I'm also putting a band together to go on tour, to tour my new album, Make Anger Great Again. Obviously, we don't know when that's going to happen yet with the lockdown and stuff. But as soon as I can get out and play those songs with a rock and roll band on a sweaty stage somewhere, I'll be there. So and beyond that, I've got no idea. I'm very much like that. I'm not very. I don't plan ahead too far. I plan ahead about a year, and then after that, who knows? I mean, I didn't know I was going to write a book. Who knows? I might take up painting or something, or write a political folk album or something.
Well, yeah, just do it as it comes then.
One of the benefits of being independent, man, I can do what I want. I don't have a label saying, hey, that last album did well, do another one of them. It's like, I can follow my muse wherever it takes me. And that's another upside to being independent and being able to do your own thing.
Love it. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today, James. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Anyway, all the listeners, please subscribe to our stuff, but more importantly, like and subscribe to any of James's. I've been on his YouTube during this week, even had a tour around his house earlier. So that's all fun. Thanks again, James, for joining us. And thank you everyone for listening at home. Bye.